So I want to talk about Star Wars The Last Jedi, the most polarizing Star Wars movie ever. More than Rogue One, more than the prequels. I just want to say before I get into this topic that there's a lot of people fighting over this movie right now. This has split the Star Wars fandom down the middle, and I just want to say that people, like, I've been told, I've talked to friends of mine who are fighting with their siblings. I've heard like friendships breaking up over this stupid movie. Look, it's a freaking movie, all right? And I will say this, okay? No matter which way you stand on this movie, whether you like it or you dislike it, one thing I've noticed is that people's reasons for liking it and people's reasons for disliking it are very, very valid. And people aren't seeing both sides of this. Look, if you like this movie, you need to understand that if somebody doesn't like it, it doesn't mean that there's some fat virgin fanboy who is obsessed with Star Wars and can't let go of the past. And if you're one of those people who dislike the movie, not everybody who likes this movie is a freaking casual babby, liberal who is paid off by Disney. People need to stop acting like freaking children. And I'm talking about both the fans and the critics. I've seen some critics on Twitter who I respected at one time, and I still kind of respect. I'm not going to name any names, but they've been so condescending towards the fandom and how, all these conspiracy theories about fans purposely downvoting it on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that. Like, The Force Awakens had a lot of haters too, but that didn't happen with that movie. People genuinely dislike this movie, and if you're on the other side of it, you have to understand that, and vice versa. What I want to talk about on this video is what I think is one of the major problems with this film, no matter which way you slice it, and that is the portrayal of Luke Skywalker in this movie. I want to focus on that. To me, the most annoying thing about The Last Jedi, besides that constant beating you over the head about, the meta narrative about how this movie's changing Star Wars and they keep reminding you of it over and over and over again, which I discussed in my spoiler review, is the way they treated the character of Luke Skywalker. Now, we know that Rian Johnson took over from J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams made Chapter 1, which is The Force Awakens, laid everything out. Rian Johnson took that idea with virtually no input from Abrams and just made his own story. And the problem is when you do something like that, it can create plot holes and inconsistencies. The character of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi is inconsistent to who Luke Skywalker is. Now, before somebody who, again, there's a lot of people being dicks nowadays, but there's people out there who are saying, well, your idea, the fans' idea of Luke Skywalker, Rian Johnson blows that up with a blowtorch. No, you're all wrong. Like, you assume Skywalker's this way, but no, Rian Johnson's a genius because he wrote him this way. No, I'm not talking about Luke from the EU, or Luke from Battlefront, or Luke from the books, or Luke from The Legend of Luke Skywalker. No, let's talk about Luke in the original trilogy, because if there wasn't an original trilogy, these movies would never happen. That's the original Luke Skywalker, the character that was written by George Lucas, Richard Marquardt, Irvin Kershner, the whole team over there for all the movies. And this Luke Skywalker in Last Jedi, there's a lot of problems with this character, and I'm going to tell you what my issues were with this Luke Skywalker in this movie. And it has nothing to do with me being a Luke fanboy or me wanting him to be like he was in the books. Like I said, this is actual, like, focus on the character and analyzing what the character represents and what he is, okay? Go back to the original trilogy. The first movie was renamed in 1980 A New Hope, and that was about Luke. Luke was the new hope for the rebels to beat the Empire and for the galaxy to be at peace and for the war to end. And as you progress through the story, there's a lot of development for Luke. Luke at first doesn't want to get involved, and then after a while, when he sees his aunt and uncle die, there was nothing left for him, and he got involved because he always wanted to be like his father. Then he finds out who his father really is, and it becomes a conflict within him about the conflict within his father. I find it really hard for me to believe. And this is what really bugged me about this movie, dude. Like, this was bad. I find it really hard to believe, and I want you to hear me out on this one, that Luke Skywalker, who not only during Empire, when he's training with Yoda, moving the rocks, which they made sure to make fun of in this movie, when he was training with Yoda, he saw a vision of his friends dying and immediately stopped his training with Yoda and flew out there to save them, knowing that he might confront Vader. He wasn't ready for it, but he thought he was. He was reckless. He went out there because he cared about his friends. He didn't want them to die. And on top of that, Luke Skywalker went on a damn suicide mission to the second Death Star to confront Sith Master Darth Sidious and Darth Vader, his own father, because he saw good in Darth Vader. Luke Skywalker is the redeemer of the Star Wars saga. That's what he does. When everybody else tells him that he's wrong, when the Emperor tells him he's wrong, when his own sister's like, just run away, far away. If he can find you, leave this place. He was so determined to save his father, knowing that he was going into the lion's den against two very powerful Sith Lords. And he still went in there, and at the end of the day, he was right. You mean to tell me because he sensed that Ben Solo had a little bit of darkness in him, which he said in the movie was from Snoke, that he would kill his own nephew? I mean, this guy, Luke Skywalker, it's mind-boggling to me. And there have been people criticizing this movie, and they a lot of times bring up this point. And this is not about romanticizing the heroes, because again, that meta narrative in the movie was Luke tells Rey, yeah, I became a legend when I redeemed Darth Vader, but I really wasn't a legend. I'm actually a failure. I'm a failure. Like, that's the story Rian Johnson's telling us, that he failed with Ben Solo, so that makes him a failure, right? So in Luke's eyes, he's a failure. And that to me was so uncharacteristic, because we have a guy who blew up the Death Star, who did fail against Vader in Empire, but redeemed him ultimately. Luke is not a failure. And he went ahead and started a new Jedi Order, which was, now we know the real story. Ben Solo thought that Luke was going to kill him. Luke hesitated for a second. Why Luke would even think about killing his own nephew is beyond me. And then Ben Solo took the whole thing down and ran away with Jedi. And they eventually would, of course, possibly become the Knights of Ren. We don't know yet. We're probably going to find out in episode 9. Now, there's problems with this story that I need to talk about real quick. It's not just the comparison between Luke in the old trilogy and Luke now. Okay? Something, without question, something changed. Rian Johnson made a complete change to the story that J.J. Abrams was laying out in episode 7, which we're going to get to that here in a minute. How does it make any sense? Explain this to me. That Luke Skywalker said in this movie that Snoke had already gotten to Ben Solo, and he thought, this is where it gets interesting, because this is another counter argument I keep hearing. Luke thought that Ben was beyond redemption, which again, uncharacteristic of Luke, but let's go with it, okay? Ben's beyond redemption. So Luke survived the attack. He knew that Ben Solo and several Jedi defected, and that Supreme Leader Snoke was out there. But yet Luke Skywalker, the hero of the galaxy, the guy who redeemed the Chosen One, abandons his sister and Han Solo, his best friend, and the entire galaxy to go to Ahch-To, disconnect from the Force, and be like, whatever. You mean to tell me that Luke Skywalker would leave the galaxy in possible serious danger from the likes of Supreme Leader Snoke, Kylo Ren, who he knew was extremely powerful, and he knew Snoke was too, and his Jedi Padawan. And he knows that in that era, in the post-Return of the Jedi era, there were no Jedi, because they were all killed. So who's going to protect the Republic from these dark Jedi, for lack of a better term? Not to use an EU phrase, but what the hell? That, to me, ruined this freaking movie. I mean, it honestly did, because that's not Luke Skywalker. It's not that it's not my Luke, or, oh, you had perceived notions. No, that is not the character of Luke Skywalker. It makes no sense. And I'm going to give you one more example. Why in the world, if this guy wanted to go to Ahch-To, this proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Rian Johnson's vision was completely different from J.J. Abrams. Force Awakens and Last Jedi don't even correlate together when it comes to this particular thing. So Lor San Tekka knew that the Jedi, there can be no balance without the Jedi. But in this movie, Lor San Tekka, who is Luke's longtime friend that was explored in the books that apparently don't even matter anymore. And I'm not talking about the old EU. I'm talking about the current canon books. You know, Rian Johnson took a dump on those books too, because he killed Phasma. He freaking made Holdo uncharacteristic of the book. It was like a totally different story, but let's go with it. Why would Luke tell Rey in this movie, you think I went into isolation for no reason? No, he left because he felt guilty for wanting to kill Ben Solo, leaving the gap, which was very naive and very immature and very just, we're past this Luke Skywalker. This is not, Luke Skywalker never ran away from anything, bro. He's a hero. And you're telling me that Luke Skywalker ran away to get away from it all. Well, here's a question then. If he ran away to get away from everything, why would he give Lord Santeca a map to find him? Why? Why would Luke Skywalker, if he never wanted to be found again, give Lord Santeca a map to find him that somehow Leia knew that Lord Santeca had, which was the map to the location of Skywalker? Is that really what J.J. Abrams intended when he made Force Awakens? Do you really believe that the story he was trying to tell was that Luke freaking ran away because he felt bad for almost killing his nephew? Is that really Luke Skywalker? And the entire thing in interviews that JJ said was the whole thing behind this trilogy is, where's Luke Skywalker? That's behind this story. Where has Luke Skywalker been? What happened to Luke after Jedi? And he wrote this story about how Luke went into isolation, which again, Yoda has done. Now, people have compared Luke to Yoda, and they've said, oh, well, why are you coming down on Luke for doing something that Yoda did? The difference between that is that when Yoda went into isolation, the Emperor had complete control of the galaxy. He had complete control of the courts, the Senate, all of the freaking power. He had everything. The Sith was at their absolute peak during that time period, right around Revenge of the Sith, going into A New Hope. Yoda had absolutely no chance. So he went into isolation to wait for what was going to happen in the future. And in the novel for Revenge of the Sith, they actually explain it better because they explain that Yoda saw a vision of his purpose in the future, which was, of course, to train Luke, who would save the galaxy. This is different because by the time that Luke was betrayed by Ben Solo and he took down the Hutt and everything, the First Order hadn't even been established yet. Because if you look at the opening crawl, when Luke went into hiding, that's when the First Order came into power. It even says it in the opening crawl of The Force Awakens. So it's not like Luke, knew about the First Order, but he definitely knew about Supreme Leader Snoke and Ben Solo. He was just going to abandon his family because he didn't want to be a part of the fight. That's not Luke Skywalker. That, to me, was horrible writing. Sorry, but it's terrible writing. People need to get off of Rian Johnson's dick. Look, I respect Rian Johnson as a visionary filmmaker. I'm very unbiased here. And the scene in the movie where the Supreme Leader Snoke betrayal, when Ben Solo betrays him, was some of the best writing that he's ever done. I loved it. It was fantastic. But the way he wrote Luke Skywalker in this movie, this is not Luke Skywalker. There were fan theories about where he disappeared to and why, like why he disappeared, that were literally 100 times better than this. 100 times better. The big one that I had loved was the idea that Luke went to Ahch-To to find out why every time a new Jedi Order pops up, somebody goes evil and destroys it. And it was kind of like, what is the Force trying to tell me? See, that actually makes sense. But we find out in the movie that he went because he felt guilty. This was horrible. Like, this was... You can like the movie all you want to, and there are good things about Last Jedi, but the writing of Luke Skywalker, no matter which way you slice it, is very inconsistent to the original character. I think a lot of folks realize that it's not Luke Skywalker the way he should be, which is the way he is, not the way that the fanboys want him, the way that he is. And to me, it's complete BS that people are being so condescending about it. It's like Rian Johnson was trying to be this artsy-fartsy filmmaker with scenes of Rey touching the cave and whatnot, and now realizing and not understanding the character of Luke. The movie doesn't even respect... It's not that it doesn't even respect the OT. It doesn't even respect Force Awakens. Because there's so many things that were opened up in Force Awakens that are either not explained in this movie, or explained poorly, or just written out lazily. I just thought it was a bad idea. Bad idea. This is not Luke Skywalker. Let me know if you agree with me. And if you don't, go back and watch the original trilogy and pay attention to Luke Skywalker's character arc. His character was the last of the Jedi, like Yoda told him in his final moments, and it was his job to pass on what he learned. He tried to do it. Ben Solo betrayed him. But there's no way that I believe that Luke Skywalker would try to kill Ben Solo because he thought he was evil and he couldn't be redeemed, when Rey herself thought that he could be redeemed. What's going to happen if Kylo gets redeemed in Episode 9? He's going to look pretty dumb, isn't he? And it was a big misunderstanding, but he's the one who created Kylo Ren. It was like they were trying to be cute with it and say, oh, well, the Last Jedi created the last Supreme Leader or whatever's going to end up happening. I didn't like it, and that's what I think about it.